So here at Trinity, before we get into the sermon, if you're a guest with us, we have what's called a Worldview segment. And the reason we do a Worldview segment is, first of all, we believe more today than ever, Christians need to be informed about what's happening in the world. Informed why? So you could pray, know how to pray. And through prayer, you can be empowered to act, empowered to do something. There's no greater enigma than an uninformed Christian. An uninformed Christian, in my view, is like a soldier unaware of his or her mission. It's like a physician ignorant of medicine, or an educator without knowledge. So Rabbi Abraham Herschel, famous rabbi, once said, "The opposite of good, get this, is not evil. The opposite of good is indifference." In the church and as Christians, we cannot be guilty of the sin of indifference. Indifference leads to apathy. And we're on the clock, the Church of Jesus Christ in America, we're on the clock. I believe the Lord's given us a prophetic 4-year window of opportunity to rebuild the spiritual foundations that have been torn up over the past 10 plus years. And we have to do our part. Paul said, make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And this is our kairos moment. The word opportunity in the Greek is kairos. It's seeing a divine moment and seizing it. In Ezekiel 22:30, God, through the prophet Ezekiel, said, I searched for a man who would rebuild the wall and would stand in the gap, and I didn't find any. So we want to be wall builders and gap standers. To stand in the gap, we're using that phrase gap as an acronym, and it means to go in prayer, to act in service, and then to provide through bold generosity like never before. And I want to talk about peace through strength. So when Pearl Harbor was attacked, the naval admiral in Japan in 1941 said this, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." This principle is true in all of life. When a powerful force finally awakens and takes decisive action, everything changes. We see this principle playing out right now before our very eyes. For years, the Mexican cartels have operated with near impunity, flooding America with deadly fentanyl, terrorizing their own country, and being involved in human trafficking. But now, something has shifted. I've never seen this in my lifetime. The fear that the cartels once imposed on civilians, law enforcement, and entire governments is now turning back on men. According to a recent report in the New York Times, cartel operatives are on the run, shutting down drug labs, and even fearing for their lives, not because of some new peace talks, but because a strong leader has drawn a red line and is backing it up with real consequences. Our current administration has designated the cartels as terrorists, which means what? The U.S. military can engage them directly. With this designation, cartels can be targeted with covert special force raids. Their assets can be seized around the world, and they literally are on the run. So the principle of peace through strength, it's one of the oldest, most tested principles of leadership. From the time of the Romans to President Reagan, peace comes not through appeasement, but through decisive power that commands respect. This past week, the Mexican government handed over to the U.S. government 29 cartel members to be brought up for prosecution charges. That's historic. You see, church, this is the difference between soft power and hard power. The previous administration used soft power, hoping that words, diplomacy, and economic aid would encourage the Mexican government and the police to protect their borders and do what's right. But history has proven time and time again that evil does not surrender to polite suggestions. It only backs down when confronted by a force greater than itself. And the Bible is filled with moments like this. There's a book in the Old Testament, the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a man raised up by God to rebuild the broken down city of Jerusalem, particularly the walls around Jerusalem. And it's an interesting story. And in chapter 5, there were officials that were involved in abuse and corruption. So you know what Nehemiah did? I wouldn't advise you. He beat them, he pulled their hair, and he got them into line real quick. King Josiah is another guy. When a sleeping giant is awakened and a righteous leader arises and says enough is enough. This amazing king brought about one of the greatest recorded revivals in all of history, in all of the Bible, when he saw that his entire nation was given over to idolatry. Destiny was awakened inside of him. He woke up. He addressed the spiritual crisis by smashing the idols, burning down the shrines, and cleansing the nation from idolatry. And then in the life of Jesus, he walked into the temple in Matthew chapter 21. He saw that it had been given over. It had become a den of thieves. And with righteous indignation, with bold action, he kicked over tables. He drove out the money changers and their animals. And he made this declaration: "This is my Father's house, and it shall be known as a house of prayer." We're talking about leadership that confronts evil. In the church, in politics, in society, and even in our families, we must ask, are we the sleeping giants? Have we allowed evil to grow unchecked because we've preferred comfort over confrontation? If nothing else, this moment in history is a powerful reminder that when righteous leadership awakens, evil trembles. Oh, I love that. And it's time for the church, the nation, and individuals to wake up to the battles that are around us, because when sleeping giants rise up, everything changes. As Edmund Burke said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. We cannot be guilty of that at this particular hour. We must stand tall, stand strong, be courageous, and force evil to back down in Jesus' name.